Good morning. Good morning. It's Tuesday morning, coming to you live from the heart of the Great White North. This is Freedom Fighter Radio. I'm your host, Joey Salvador. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing and downloading our Freedom Fighter Radio app. And we are going to stay connected when you have your Freedom Fighter Radio app available on your phone all the time, as you'll be notified and you'll also instantly get tuned in to the show when you have the Freedom Fighter Radio app, because you can just turn it on and boom, we're right there. So today is going to be a great day. There are some very important topics that we need to be discussing today. COVID-19, restaurants and bar owners want restriction lifted and they're feeling left out. I can't believe that Global News is actually covering that story. And today, conservative leader Erin O'Toole will be facing first caucus meeting after the election loss. So we have to keep an eye on what's going there. Today also is the next day right after that 8-hour outage of Facebook. That it's a very unprecedented event for Facebook that happened yesterday. We are also going to keep an eye. It seems like Facebook's going back to congressional hearings today, as there's something sinister going on within Facebook, as there's some sort of play that they're doing right now. It seems to be a false flag attack, so that Facebook can get an excuse to bring the hammer down when it comes to restriction. Federal government could push provinces on vaccine mandates for workers, as document says, according to the Canadian press. And what's behind a trucker shortage in Canada? And we heard of a trucker shortage in the UK before. And so in Canada, the Britain's labor crisis is offering a clue. And what drives people in Saskatchewan to remain unvaccinated? And last but not the least, we are going to try and cover all of these topics. And on the roster today as well is China flies record 52 planes towards self-ruled Taiwan. Man, so many things going on in the world and in the freedom movement today. So let's get this show started right now.
Freedom Fighter Radio, what is up? Woo!
Shout out to Freedom Fighter Radio and Joe. You're doing great work, brother, and I love it. All right, always.
Make sure you listen to the Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Show.
I'm on Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Joe Show. That's quite a mouthful.
Yes. Hey guys, this is Chris Sky. Listen to Freedom Fighter Radio. They're here today, back in the blue, and so am I.
Oh my goodness. I was muted again, folks. I apologize, apologize. I wonder if everybody heard Angela Rusincario was saying good morning. Social credit score is coming, and you seen me in Toronto. You were saying, and I was just talking about how you should have said um, hi to me, high five me, and gave me a hug. I would have given you a hug at the backing the blue rally. I'm trying to come back out there, but I need our rallies to happen again in the weekdays or maybe on a Sunday. If it's happening on a Sabbath, I'm not able to come out because I'm serving my Sabbath on a Saturday. I've been following the Jewish calendar and observing the Sabbath for more than 10 years now. But since we're talking about rallies, what we learned from 1986, the 1986 revolution in the Philippines, I was about 12, 11 years old then, and the way we were able to topple the tyranny in the Philippines, the dictator, was when people are coming by the busload from even from the countryside, pouring into Metro Manila in the Philippines, where when people come, they stay. They don't, they don't just rally for 4 hours or 5 hours or just for a weekend and then they go home. No, that was not the way we were able to squeeze tyranny out of the country. The way we did it was people come, people stay, people come some more, and people stay some more, and that accumulated all the buildup of the crowd to millions of people on the street, and people are not leaving until the tyrant left the country. And I remember people taking shifts, people going home at night, and but some people are staying on the roads to vigil overnight, and then the people who went home to get some sleep in their own beds at night and took a shower at home in the morning when they come back for to return for their shift, they bring food for those people who were staying overnight to vigil overnight. That's how we toppled the tyranny in the Philippines in 1986. And a friend of ours from the Alex Jones show also talked about how that's exactly how they were successful to break down the Berlin Wall during the Berlin Wall rally that we've witnessed. I think that's early 90s or late 80s. I can't remember. But shout out to Angela, is shout out to Bill Ambrose. Good morning to David Carlson and Lawyers for Truth tomorrow. OJ, I have a question for them. The tyranny is getting out of hand. Saskatchewan is a totalitarian state. So, Lawyers for Truth are sending pre-recorded segments for their show. So it is not yet live. We haven't really organized. We haven't come to that kind of workflow yet. But in the future, yes, David, we are hoping that we can have Lawyers for Truth have a live session on a weekly. But right now, the arrangement right now is that they will be sending me whenever they're very busy too. So we're trying to make do with what we have at the moment. They are going to send me pre-recorded segments for the show. And recently, Catherine's not able to do it because they were actively they have a fight on their hands in Alberta, so we understand what's going on. But today is the day after that big 8 hour brownout or blackout, whatever can you whatever can we call what happened yesterday with Facebook. So I I don't know how we can measure if things got better or if things got worse on Facebook, but definitely yesterday we had an opportunity. It was a great opportunity that it presented itself that the Facebook outage allowed us to broadcast on Rumble, and now we are also welcoming Twitter as part of the roster. And shout out to all those who are listening to Freedom Fighter Radio app. We have more and more people signing up for our mailing list and our notification list, and usually they're the one who uh, get uh, get to download the radio app, and consistently we got new applicants to our requests. We get new requests, people signing up on our mailing list, our notification list, and people are downloading our app. So please, if you haven't done it yet, if you haven't joined our mailing list yet and receive your link to the pre radio app, please do it today because that's how we are going to build this radio show. So we read the. I hope my mic wasn't muted when I read all of those um, headlines earlier today. Because I'm always having a problem with my mute button popping up here, which becomes a problem. So some of the things we are going to talk about today is restaurant bar owners want restriction lifted and feeling left out, which was a story covered by Global News. I can't believe that they would cover such a news, but I'm pretty sure I haven't listened to that news piece from Global, but I'm pretty sure they will spin it again towards the narrative of the tyrants. But the conservative leader today will also be facing his very first caucus meeting after the election loss. We're going to touch that a little bit. And then, according to the Canadian press, federal government could push provinces on vaccine mandate for workers, as a document says. What's behind the truck shortage in Canada? We heard a truckers shortage in the UK about a month or 2 months ago, I think, and in the United Kingdom they call them lorry drivers. The lorry drivers have a shortage, a heavy shortage, which caused shortage of food in the markets in the UK, and for the United Kingdom, it was actually what they call the pingdemic that caused a lot of the drivers to not be able to show up for work. Well, the pingdemic is when they started pinging all of these drivers on their phone saying that they have been exposed to a potential spread due to the app. Actually, nobody in the UK downloaded any kind of app, but it just appeared on their phones. It was basically hijacked by the government, and they started getting pinged and giving them orders to stay home for 14 days because they could have potentially been in contact trace according to contact tracers that they probably been in contact with someone that is sick. So because of all the pandemic, people are being asked to stay home. All the drivers, half of the drivers stayed home, and nobody delivered the food from farm to market. So that was a problem. And so this CBC News headline says, "What's behind the truck shortage in Canada? Britain's labor crisis offers a clue." What drives people in Saskatchewan to remain unvaccinated? This is I'm pretty sure this global news again is spun towards their narrative, but we are going to listen and check it out. And so we'll have an opportunity to debunk all kinds of lies and fear mongering that they are going to, for sure, again, spin this story to their favor. And last but not the least, on our roster this morning, China flies record 52 planes towards South Route Taiwan. I'm gonna offer a Wikipedia article during this coverage on our show today. about the relationship between the Philippines and Taiwan that has been forged for many, many decades, if not centuries. Because Taiwan's pretty much a swim distance away from the northern tip of the Philippines. And I'm very disappointed with the current president Duterte, who is not very vocal on how he is going to help defend the Taiwanese from the threat of the Chinese president made actually in July 1st, Canada Day. He made a threat against the Taiwanese that before the year is over, that China will make its move and invade Taiwan this year. So, folks, those are some of the things we're going to try our best to cover all of those stories today in this morning Freedom Fighter morning radio show. But before the very first one on the list is we're gonna listen to Steve Bannon's um exchange yesterday with a couple of gentlemen who talks about what's going on at Facebook. So I'm a little worried here because it's either one of the two situation we're gonna see from Facebook now. Facebook has somebody, a so-called whistleblower from inside Facebook, apparently caused all of the outages yesterday, and also she is exposing a lot of trade secrets or inner secrets that's happening in Facebook. But it seems that it probably is an inside job, just trying to pretext a very heavy-handed move by the company to bring down the hammer, and bring more censorship on the platform. Now, having said that, it is possible that there is an internal strife going on inside Facebook, which is might actually be a positive for all the freedom fighters and all the dissenting views within the platform, because if indeed they're trying to hijack the power away from Zuckerberg, and he started pushing back against those internal forces who's trying to make him be more tyrannical. Basically, I think a certain person, can't remember her name, a certain person is trying her best to push the CEO to totally get rid of all um, the conservative speakers within the platform. But so far, the CEO Zuckerberg is probably feeling that he doesn't have the power, and the only way they can actually attain that power to censor everything that is right leaning um, opinion makers, and opinion speakers on the platform is through congressional mandate, and I think that will give Zuckerberg um, his hands to be untied to really come down heavy on all the dissenting voices within the platform against the wokeness, against liberalism and leftism that's going on worldwide. But having said that, if the strife is truly internally happening and there's a power struggle, the other effect would be possibly that Zuckerberg will really get sick and tired of all those who are pushing against him, that he will, out of rebellion, out of spite, will actually open up the algorithms to allow more conservative values, conservative viewpoints to be spoken without impediment on the platform. And that would be a very good problem and a good prospect for us freedom fighters who has been using Facebook as our platform. Like I said yesterday, it is mostly um, us freedom fighters and mostly conservative leaning viewpoints that are using social media more and more to spread our message, because we are pretty much mainstream media is hijacked and monopolized by the woke left. So we don't have any other choice but to try and because that's all across, broadcast television, broadcast radio, and mainstream newspaper are all hijacked by the tyrants. So we don't have much of a choice. But the alternative for us is to go use either um, mobile apps or social media or other means or websites and blog sites to send our message out there. So that's the situation, I think. And let's get deeper to this conversation. Don't go away. When we come back, we are going to dive deep. First on the roster of the story to cover today is the data stolen from Facebook. Apparently, 600 terabytes of personal data stolen from Facebook yesterday by hackers. But let's dive deeper, more into that when we come back. So please, don't go away. You're listening to Freedom Fighter Radio. I'm your host Joey Salvador, coming to you live and excitingly energetic from the heart of the Midtown, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. To all of our friends and our brothers and sister freedom fighters all across the world, stay tuned. Don't go away. We'll be right back after these messages.
Freedom Fighter Radio. What is up?
Shout out to Freedom Fighter Radio. And Joe, you're doing great work, brother, and I love it. All right? Always.
Make sure you listen to the Freedom Fighter Radio on Ordinary Show.
I'm on Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Joe Show. That's quite a mouthful.
Yes. Hey guys, this is Chris Guy. Listen to Freedom Fighter Radio. They're here today, back in the blue, and so am I.
Please consider supporting the OJTV production costs and be an insider member for only $3 a month. Go to patreon.com/OJTV Canada. Thank you for your continued support.
Canadians all across the country are sick and tired of the lies, the fear-mongering, and the hate speech they hear from the mainstream media. Download the free radio app, Freedom Fighter Radio. Click the link below, scan our QR code, join our mailing list, and get a free download of our Freedom Fighter Radio app only here on OJTV on The Ordinary Joe Show. Yes, shout out to all our Freedom Fighter Radio app listeners. And today we are welcoming Twitter into the fold. I always had this Twitter account, but it wasn't for freedom fighting. But I think, we are going to repurpose this Twitter that we've used back in 2019. I created a Twitter account 2019 for the purpose of following the championship saga by the Toronto Raptors, and many Filipino Canadians are following and celebrating the Toronto Raptors leading up to the win of the championship. And so I was using that for that purpose. But yesterday, it's a blessing in disguise. When Facebook shut down, we continued broadcasting on Rumble and Freedom Fighter Radio app. And then I realized, and I just figured out that I could actually add Twitter into the simulcast. So Twitter is also part of our channels now, simulcasting to all the Twitters. And I just created a new YouTube channel yesterday, and it says that it takes about 48 hours for it to be ready for live casting. So we are on YouTube, but we are on an old channel, which is specifically for entertainment. And so people are not that much paying attention in the audience. They're not paying attention to our radio broadcast. But starting tomorrow, we are going to replace the YouTube that's part of this roster of channels with the new YouTube channel. But folks say in the days of Noah, one of the things that we learn from the scripture, um, actually, I don't think this is specifically on the scripture, but these are more of the Bible scholars that I heard this from, interpreting uh, interpreting the scriptures and the inner deeper writings that coincide with the scripture during the time during the old days. Apparently, when they say the Nephilims, the giants were walking among regular people on earth those days, and those are one of the reasons that the Lord flooded the earth. Is where there's a lot of corruption, the Nephilims, and a lot of corruption with not only with humans but corruption in nature that caused all of these crazy abnormalities in creation. So some people are saying the dinosaurs are most likely the Nephilim type um, animals that were created by all the corruption of the genetics. Because God will not create. God created big beasts like giant beasts like elephants, and in the ocean, there are whales, right? That are and sharks that are present in the ocean. But on land, mammals, the biggest that we know are elephants, and some of the beasts that we know are tigers and lions and buffaloes and oxes and rhinos. Um, but for the most part, even these predators, they don't get out of the way and attack humans. They attack humans when they're provoked. Usually, this is what we know, or they are cornered into a certain corner. But for the most part, people, unless these animals are hungry or they don't have in their natural habitat, they're running out of food. But for the most part, what I heard is in Africa, humans and animals can live harmoniously, and animals don't go into the human dwellings normally to try and eat people, and they're mostly afraid of people too. But having dinosaurs, predators, big dinosaurs, it doesn't seem to jive with God's creation, having humans as supposed to be caretakers of the planet, and it seems to be an abnormality to be having dinosaurs running around trying to kill people. But anyways, folks, what we heard from many Bible scholars is during those days, one of the reasons before the flood, one of the reasons that a lot of these dinosaurs started disappearing. The scientific community are trying to offer the theory of there's a big meteorite that slammed into the earth, and that meteorite kind of burned the entire planet and killed all of those dinosaurs. The question is, why did it pick and chose only dinosaurs to kill if there was indeed a big meteor that hit the earth? How come it didn't kill everything else, right? So and it only specifically killed the dinosaurs. That's it's a little bit of long shot theory, in my opinion. But what we heard from Bible scholars, the dinosaurs and many of these Nephilim, or the giants that walked the face of the earth, they actually killed each other off. That's why the the what do you call that again? The not theology, but what do you call that when the mythology of the Clash of the Titans, for example. The Clash of the Titans were based on that study that the giants killed each other off, and that seems to be the way humans become dominant on the planet, because God always have been intended for humans. His most important creation are the humans, And he said, that in many references in the scripture, that the human beings, when God created humans, He created them with His image and likeness. So humans supposed to be top of the food chain, and when there's abnormalities like Nephilims and giants and dinosaurs are roaming the face of the earth, then it kind of defeats the purpose that God wants human to be dominant. But to maintain the balance, this is what I understand: is those giants killed each other off, so they just went after them. So just think of that right now. Keep that in mind, and let's use that as an analogy. And I think this is what's going to happen. As you know, the saying goes, history repeats itself. And I think we can use that analogy as with all the tyrants, all the techno tyrants, the big tech tyrants, the big pharma tyrants, the big oil tyrants, the technocrats, and the governments and the big corporations who are trying to control everything on earth, um, and pushing all of us, ordinary James and Joe, down on the ground. And like what Orwell said on his deathbed, it's most likely going to be like the end game if the tyrants are to dominate the earth. A picture that he describes for us is a boot stomping on somebody's face repeatedly. And you know, I think all of these technocrats, these big corporations, what will end up happening to bring God's glory into the picture back once more. And God's glory is also reflected by bringing human beings again on top of the food chain, because I will show you a couple of articles where a lot of the woke um, uh, fear mongers, or these woke social engineers, they're drumming up their narrative, they're drumming up their message that the future is actually better off without humans. So they're actually anti-humans, many of these technocrats and tyrants. And I'll show you two articles from mainstream um, articles, which I will be posting on the page later today, so that you guys can read up. I think one of them is New York Times, and the other one, the title is like, looking forward to a future where no more humans roam the earth. Not in exact words, but those are the gist of the message that they're trying to push forward to us. But you know, um, like I said, and many times we mentioned here, many times on the radio show, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So there's no reason actually to be fearing all of these fear mongers who's calling for the death of humanity, or for the genocide and calling of mankind, because the Lord is there's an adversary, but the Lord is always working towards bringing humanity and humans back, as as uh, as the caretakers of the planet. And the way that we can get rid of these big tyrants that seems to be um, very, very strong forces on earth, that it seems to be very difficult for us to overcome. How this is how I see it's going to happen, folks. They are just going to start killing each other off, just like what we've heard in during the time of Noah, where all of these Nephilims and all these giants and all these dinosaurs. Uh, I don't think it's plausible theory, what the scientific community was saying, like a big meteor hit the Earth. That's the reason all of these giants are not to be seen anymore. I believe the Bible scholars when they say all of these giants started killing each other off because of all the greed. The greed that they want to be dominating humans over one another, but then um, they just because of greed, they just try, then instead of going after their prey, predators killing predators. That's what happened during the days of Noah. And it reminds me of this scene that I saw. If you go to YouTube and look for the funniest knockouts, boxing knockouts ever caught on camera, there I remember a one of the funny knockouts that happened is when two boxers were fighting, and they simultaneously punch each other with a big knockout blow, and both fell on the ground, fell on the canvas, and both of them were knockout simultaneously. And that was a funny, that was a funny scene to watch, but it actually did happen. So, folks, I think our social media problem, our mainstream media problem, all the tyrants that seems to be so powerful on Earth right now, and we are scared. We are very concerned. What are we gonna do with these guys? They're really trying to suppress our freedoms and our human rights. But I have a feeling that it's gonna happen again. That the tyrants will just start killing each other. They're going to start attacking each other. I can see in my mind's eye that maybe Facebook will start attacking Apple, and Apple and start attacking Google. So all the big tech technocrats will just eat eat each other up, and all the big corporation and all the big politicians that seems to be friendly within the woke side of the political spectrum, they will just start attacking each other, and that's how humans will come up to the top of the food chain again. We don't even have to do anything really. They'll kill each other, and that's how we are going to get our freedom. We don't even need to lift up a finger. God will take care of all those problems for us. I have a strong feeling that's what's going to happen. So this internal strife that we're hearing within Facebook, I don't know. I kind of feel like this might be an early sign of the giants and the technocrats attacking each other. But yesterday there was a good conversation in Steve Bannon's podcast about this. In the war room. So I'd like us to listen to it. But before we do that, let's take a very short break, and when we come back, we'll be listening into Steve Bannon's war room episode yesterday.
Freedom Fighter Radio. What is up?
Shout out to Freedom Fighter Radio. And Joe, you're doing great work, brother, and I love it. All right? Always.
Make sure you listen to the Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Show.
I'm on Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Joe Show. That's quite a mouthful.
Yes. Hey guys, this is Chris Sky. Listen to Freedom Fighter Radio. They're here today, back in the blue, and so am I.
Please consider supporting the OJTV production costs and be an insider member for only $3 a month. Go to patreon.com/OJTV Canada. Thank you for your continued support.
Canadians all across the country are sick and tired of the lies, the fear-mongering, and the hate speech they hear from the mainstream media. Download the free radio app, Freedom Fighter Radio. Click the link below, scan our QR code, join our mailing list, and get a free download of our Freedom Fighter Radio app only here on OJTV on The Ordinary Joe Show. Yes, it's Freedom Fighter Radio only here on the Ordinary Joe Show. I'm your host, Joey Salvador. Welcome back. Welcome back. Shout out to all of our Freedom Fighter Radio app listeners, and welcome to a new channel to the fold, our Twitter. It's right now it's called It's Just Another Ordinary Joe Show Twitter channel, but we are going to recreate the entire branding, and we will start bringing in freedom fighting members of that channel, and we will rename that to Freedom Fighter Radio Twitter app. So thank you for joining us. YouTube is also in the house, and Rumble, and multiple channels here on Facebook. So wow, what interesting day yesterday, having a Facebook shut down for 8 hours, and the internal strife that we hear is going on in there. I think that is an early sign of what we seen or heard from Bible scholars as they describe the way the humans were able to overcome against the Nephilims. And when I say Nephilims, it's a combination of human giants, humanoid giants, and also gigantic beast of uh, animals. And many people believe that dinosaurs were actually Nephilims, an abnormality of the genome, the gene. Because I don't remember God creating dinosaurs in the story of creation, right? I think God said, He created the fish of the sea, and I think that will includes whales, and some people are saying that sharks, alligators, frogs. These are all part of the Nephilim age or the dinosaur age, right? But the biggest mammals that we know are elephants, rhinos, tigers, lions, oxes, and hippos. Those are the biggest ones, but not as big as gigantic size dinosaurs. But the dinosaurs killed each other off. This is what the Bible scholars are saying. This is how humans were freed from their tyranny. And that's why we don't see any more giants roaming the earth. We don't see any more dinosaurs roaming the earth. The reason for that is that they killed each other off. It's a long shot to believe the theory that a big meteorite fell on the face of the earth and killed all of the dinosaurs. Because if a meteorite or a meteor actually killed all the dinosaurs, how come it didn't kill all the other things, like all the other animals and humans? So that's that. So that analogy kind of brings us to the tyrants that we see today in corporate America, the tyrants that we see in big pharma, big tech, and big governments. So, folks, let's go now to Steve Bannon's War Room yesterday, as they talk about as it was happening, because this is the day after that big brownout or lockout that happened on Facebook. Let's find out what do they think what's going on there yesterday as it was happening.
Joe Allen, tell us what's going on.
Yes, Steve. Shira Frankel at the New York Times reported that at least this morning, Facebook employees couldn't get into the building and they couldn't get into conference rooms. Apparently, their building, like many modern buildings, are set up according to an Internet of Things paradigm, meaning that if one thing goes, anything else can go. In addition to this, as Posobiec says, you have all these other systems going down. So it's actually very curious. The first reports were that Facebook's DNS record was scrubbed. DNS is a domain name system. Basically, that's what directs you, once you've put the name of a website into your browser, to the servers that hold the website. That was a plausible explanation, but a lot of security guys and IT guys are scratching their heads as to how it could cause this massive outage across the system.
We are also seeing, claims, and now this is all completely unverified. I want to put, if Denver could put up, the Daily Mail has a great map as their lead story. Let's put up, we don't need to see our faces. Put up the Daily Mail's
lead story you'll see across the country, Jack.
So there are people who are making, again, unverified, but there are people who are making claims. People are also that they have responsibility for the hack, claiming that there was their handiwork. There are also claims out there about hackers offering Facebook user data, potentially 600 terabytes worth of the data.
Talk about some of the guys who are bragging already. They get 600
right.
terabytes of data.
They're talking about people on some of these forums, places that are known for people to hang this stuff out there, bragging. They said, we were behind it. We're sitting on the data. We've got it. First name, last name, username, messages. Remember, WhatsApp, that's all messages. Facebook Messenger, that's all messages.
Does Denver have that?
If that's true, I think Facebook's going to have an issue with when they come to some of these questions about encryption and the promises they've made about security. But I think if one thing we can really say, though, just looking at it from my analyst hat on, this ends the antitrust debate. We cannot have consolidation like this in this country. This is ridiculous.
Joe, go ahead, Joe. Give us your thoughts.
I really couldn't agree more. I mean, when you have a complex system, it's extremely fragile, and if you don't have redundancy set up in the system, such as multiple platforms or multiple services, you take out the one central system, and that's it. It's lights out. So if this is one of many instances where you see that the fragility of a complex system is unacceptable.
But hang on for a second. Slow down. If this was just Facebook and had the WhatsApp and the Instagram, the other parts to it, but you're seeing, and this is, I think, the concern, if we can get the Daily Mail map up, Denver, one more time, simple Daily Mail map I sent you guys, you'll see it is every population center in the country. And it's across major platforms. You've had AT&T, you've had Verizon. We had Verizon up here in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill. It's not simply Facebook.
Rumble. I'm on Twitter. Rumble and Getter are firing it up. They're saying no issues to report. No issues to report. Rumble running smoothly. Getter running smoothly. No issues there.
Okay. Joe, give us talk to us everything else. What are the other systems that are down right now, or it looks like they have been hacked and at least had momentarily outages?
I think Jack's pretty much covered all of them. I can't think of any that he hasn't listed. One amusing element to this is that because their DNS records seem to be scrubbed, Facebook is now for sale on various domain name registries. So if you want to get rich quick, you better scoop it up while you still can. There are a lot of different theories. I hadn't even heard about the 6 terabytes of user information. Although I did see something just a moment ago before I came on that there were claims that 1.5 billion users were being that their information was being held, and one by one they were trying to do ransomware or
Wait! I've got to say something.
Hang on, George.
I've got to say something.
Yep.
All I'm going to say is it seems to me that a lot of people owe Mike Lindell an apology. Because all these people who said this stuff, and I'm not saying something happened, but all these people said it couldn't be done. It couldn't be taken down. All of these systems couldn't be taken down. They couldn't be hacked. They could never be. No, it's not possible. Yeah. Mike, Mike, you're crazy. You're talking crazy. What just happened today?
Here's the thing. Look, a lot of this reporting is you're hearing it raw right now. But what we can tell you is that it looks like many different major platforms geographically spread out, at least across the country. Eventually, I know I'm going to get that. I'm going to get my Daily Mail map up there that shows you it's all the population centers in the country. And of course, you got places like Greater Idaho and others that look like they're untouched, but it's across major systems. This is just not related to Facebook. Do we have Zach Voorhees?
Well, it sounds like what you have is a cascading situation here, where this started with Facebook, but then again, because of, and as Joe was talking about, the complexities, because of the various connections that all these companies have on the tech side, that yes, of course, it started with Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, which we all know are siloed under, right? That's all under Facebook. But because this created such an error, now you're seeing rolling errors in all the other apps, all the other networks, the actual, Verizon, AT&T. So you're talking about your service providers. They're having issues. We actually haven't seen something like this before. I can't even think of anything that compares to this.
Oh, you've never had cross-platform like this. And people should understand right Absolutely in the middle of the show.
By the way, this is,
Okay.
as we were talking about this morning, we were talking about South China Sea and Taiwan. This is what it would look like. This is what day one,
Yeah.
exactly what day one would look
We
like
talked about when you talk about
of an invasion of Taiwan.
when you talk about unrestricted warfare, we said information warfare is they get both the psychological part of the content, and then they've got the
I've
cyber
always
where you
said,
hit this.
I've always said for a very long time that
Oh, yeah.
one of the very first things China would do if they really wanted to screw with us is take out our GPS satellites. I
Yeah.
think everybody knows that.
because
That's the reason for the anti-satellite
you
mission.
can't fight the ship. You can't combined arms goes out the window.
Well, not only that, imagine what it does to everybody just trying to drive around, your
Al-
Uber, your Lyft.
Also
you're
look at the grid, right? The power grid.
So, folks, you're listening to Freedom Fighter Radio. We were listening to a snippet from yesterday's Bannon's War Room with Steve Bannon and a couple of his male co-hosts there, talking about what's going on at Facebook. But indeed, if you have a lot of your business is running on social media, and you are very dependent on the internet with the kind of business that you run. Yesterday, you would have felt it very, very heavy with the outage of Facebook. If you're running all kinds of algorithm, all kinds of your business processes is very much intertwined with the internet or with social media. You would have felt it yesterday very heavily, and a lot of people, I know, I've heard of people whose social media account, their Twitter or their Instagram or whatever, get deplatformed, and they go on a withdrawal. It's like a drug that you are dependent on, and for a few days, they go on a withdrawal and they cannot accept that they actually lost their platform. So, for us here at Freedom Fighter Radio, I actually saw that as a good opportunity yesterday to try and or broadcast on our other alternative channels, and not being able to broadcast here on Facebook yesterday, and then reposting whatever we broadcasted from other channels and posting it here so that people can check out what's going on in our other channels. I think it's a good opportunity that wakes up all of our regular listeners to the show from Facebook to try and check out all our other alternative places, and also to join our mailing list, because something like this could happen again in the future. You never know. And this is what we need to be getting ourselves ready for, because man, it's very, it doesn't make sense for anybody to put all of their eggs in one basket. We know that even in my life as a day trader back in the day, we always say, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. We need to diversify. And that's what we're doing here. That's the reason we have, the Freedom Fighter Radio app. We have a mailing list or a notification list so that we can reach to you. We can communicate with you even if one of the tech giants gets shut down, just like yesterday. So, folks, please do scan that QR code that you see on top right corner of the screen. And forget about the one on the bottom left corner of the screen. That one is pretty old. The one that really works is the one that you see on the top right corner of the screen. Scan the QR code, join our mailing list, our notification list, so that we can stay connected even when there are outages, just like what happened yesterday. Scripture says that you don't build your house on the sand, you have to build your house on a rock. If you build your house on a rock, then you know that the wind will come and the rain will fall and the wind will blow, but your house will continue to stand. So shout out to all of those who reacted on our video from. I kind of been missing our brothers and sisters in the fight from Australia and the United Kingdom, as well as New Zealand. That I'm trying to do an earlier than 10:30 show, so that I can see our Australian brothers and sisters before that 30-day lockdown that we were not able to broadcast on our main page, the Freedom Fighter Radio Canada Facebook page. Before that 30-day, every time we turn on our broadcast, we have a lot of Australian brothers and sisters coming into the show. and saying hi. But after that 30-day ban restriction to go live, on the other side of that, it seems like all of our Australian brothers and sisters were not so active anymore, and we have to find a way to reconnect with them. That's why, folks, please do connect with us through email as well, because that's very important. So, folks, let's talk more about what happened to Facebook yesterday and what is it going to mean uh, for, especially for us freedom fighters, and how we, most of us, send our messaging out through social media, because we don't have the luxury of being fairly covered in the mainstream media. This particular snippet is called Performative Acts Behind Facebook Crash. Let's listen in again to Steve Bannon and a couple of his co hosts from yesterday's show while this outage was happening yesterday. So let's listen in.
Okay, we're gonna bring in Zach Voorhees now. We got Zach Voorhees from Google. Zach, give us an update of what you know.
So this Facebook going down, it's gone down because of a very technical issue, and that is with how names are translated to IP addresses. Those IP addresses are how we're able to connect to computers, open up connections, and exchange data. Well, that translation went down because of an update that was applied with how those names were shared with the internet. Now, as a result of that, Facebook.com appears to not have any IP address, and some domain services have already started to list it as for sale. One of the things that's really interesting is that this domain system records wipe also wiped out their sign-on services, because when they sign in through their devices or to get inside the building, it has to go onto a Facebook domain. Now that that domain no longer exists, no one can log in. And as a result of that, the Facebook engineers can't even fix the problem. Which
Can you believe that? If yesterday, when that glitch happened and the Facebook domain, facebook.com, went for sale, imagine if you bought it and you bought it, it doesn't matter if you bought it for $100 or even $1,000, and Zuckerberg wants it back. You can, if that happened and you bought facebook.com domain, accidentally it went up for sale, and nobody else saw it except you, and you bought it really quick, and then now you own it for 2 or 3 years, and Zuckerberg says, hey, I want that back, and you can then you have a leverage to start negotiating. You can say, when do you need it by? It's like, I want it right now. Okay, I'll deliver it tomorrow. You can have it tomorrow. But I need, $500 million. And then he insists, no, I want my facebook.com domain today. Okay, that'll cost you $1 billion. Oh, here's $1 billion. Just transfer it into my bank account, and here's your facebook.com back. Imagine if you were there ready to buy it, or if you knew that it was going to happen ahead of time. Imagine that. Maybe that happened. Maybe it was not made public, but somebody actually did it. I don't know. We don't know that. But that would be a big embarrassing thing to information to be disseminated for all the people to find out. But it is possible that it did happen if it went up for sale. So I thought that was funny, folks. But this guest that Bannon has from Google is actually sharing a lot of very insightful information here to what happened yesterday. But so let's go back and listen in some more.
which is resulting in the widespread outages that we're seeing today.
No, let me just keep it on. Let me just ask you, CNN, here's the thing I find amazing. When Verizon went down here, we haven't had CNN or MSNBC mention a word about this. It's quite stunning. I mean, not that we always believe that the war room's the cutting edge of signal, not noise, but it's pretty stunning. You had not had anybody break into a telecast and start talking about this.
Well, and you had, of course, we talked about this morning that Morning Joe led with Mika and Joe were just getting into tearing down Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, he was the target. That was the 2 minutes hate for today from 1984, right? It was Mark Zuckerberg. And then, of course, 60 Minutes last
Yeah.
night with the midway Scott Pelley. But all of a sudden,
Zach, how do you talk about these other platforms and other population centers? How could it just be a evolution at Facebook that went awry? Is what you're saying? And that's about DNS. Isn't that too small given the scale? And I'm talking about right now. We're hearing reports. I mean, we know that Fios Verizon went down. Other systems have gone down, and it's spread out geographically across the country. How can you relate that all back to Facebook?
Red October.
I don't know. Maybe it's a hacking attempt. We'll just have to see over the next 24 hours and see what more goes down. I think that's highly suspicious that that Facebook goes down right as the whistleblower is about to testify and after she revealed herself. And I think that right now there may be some sort of.
What do you mean by hold it? What do you mean by that? And look, there's no conspiracies, but there's no coincidences. She comes out in clearly a psyop, right? Because they're trying to say, take the Zach Voorhees and all these other people, the anti-vaxxers, the Trump people, the January 6th crowd. You got to deplatform them, right? Why do you say it's? Why do you believe it's related?
I just think that it's an interesting coincidence, and I see that this seems to be a media play. We've got essentially a left-wing whistleblower whose complaint is essentially that Facebook doesn't censor enough. She says that they only censor 3%, and it should be 100%. So her complaint is that they're not censoring 33 times more than they are today. And now there's going to be this testimony tomorrow. And so I just think that right now we're kind of in the middle of a performative act. And now that Facebook is going down, that could be part of that performative act. But I'm just speculating. I don't have, any inside knowledge.
All right, folks. When he was talking about more testimonies happening tomorrow, that tomorrow is actually today. So we need to tune in. I don't know anybody has any information where we can listen to all these testimonies being talked about, because that was yesterday's Steve Bannon podcast that we were listening to. And if they're talking about more testimonies happening tomorrow, and that was yesterday, they're talking about testimonies that will be happening today. Anybody, please share any links on the comment section if you know where can we tune in on this testimony. And folks, don't go away. We'll be right back after these messages.
Freedom Fighter Radio. What is up?
Whoa! Shout out to Freedom Fighter Radio. And Joe, you're doing great work, brother, and I love it. All right? Always.
Make sure you listen to the Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Show.
I'm on Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Joe Show. That's quite a mouthful.
Yes. Hey guys, this is Chris Sky. Listen to Freedom Fighter Radio. They're here today, back in the blue, and so am I.
Please consider supporting the OJTV production costs and be an insider member for only $3 a month. Go to patreon.com/OJTV Canada. Thank you for your continued support. Canadians all across the country are sick and tired of the lies, the fear-mongering, and the hate speech they hear from the mainstream media. Download the free radio app, Freedom Fighter Radio. Click the link below, scan our QR code, join our mailing list, and get a free download of our Freedom Fighter Radio app only here on OJTV on The Ordinary Joe Show.
Welcome back, folks. This is Freedom Fighter Radio. I'm your host, Joey Salvador. It's 10 16 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, coming to you live from the heart of the Great White North. Freedom Fighter Radio, only here on the Ordinary Joe. We're talking about what happened yesterday with the entire, 8 hours outage from Facebook. And is this is something that never happened in the past? But is this a sign for something more sinister or a lot of change in the paradigm this coming days or this coming weeks? Like I said, we haven't heard of Facebook being out for as long as 8 hours. And there are many businesses on Earth now that relies on the internet. And when we talk about the internet, we're talking about social media for people to communicate. Of course, there are other aspects of the internet that are important, but when it comes to transactions and people communicating with each other, connecting with each other, a lot of this is happening through social media. And remember some of the things that we like to talk about here, and we are going to try and stick it to Thursday mornings when we cover all of the future tech stuff. Regarding biodigital convergence, that one of the staple conversations that we'd like to touch on here on the show a lot is the fact that Zuckerberg is talking about how Facebook is one of the contenders and want to be the dominant force in the mainstreaming of the metaverse, the metaverse. The metaverse, according to Zuckerberg, will be the replacement or will be the new internet. Internet will go obsolete and it will be replaced by metaverse. Metaverse would be really the most sinister, darkest future of society where nobody is able to opt out of the internet. Everybody is constantly opt in. You're constantly connected wherever you go. With the metaverse, you don't even need a device like we talk about that in many times with Brigadier General Robert Spalding talking about how in some smart cities in his experience back when he was in China that you don't need a device to access 5G because 5G don't need a device when the real 5G. We don't have the real 5G in North America yet. But when the real 5G is rolled out, the network is exactly the same as the operating system. So you don't need two separate things. And with the advent of quantum computing, something sinister also about quantum computing that I heard is that it has a biological aspect to it. So wiring the processes of quantum computing cannot be done by just wires and chips and integrated circuits, but it has to be done on a biological brain structure, is what I heard. So I don't know exactly how to explain that yet, but I think I kind of get the gist of what is being said. But there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of spirituality. Can you believe that? We're talking about computer here, right? But there's a lot of spirituality involved, and the opening of a portal, some connection also with the Hadron Collider that's happening up in Europe, and how the opening of portal when they smash two atoms together in the Hadron Collider, that has something to do with the power of quantum computing. I can't quite explain it yet because I'm still kind of digging deeper to understand what it's all about, but it sounds very dark to me. But now, all of these big tech things, remember in 9/11, right after the attacks on the Twin Towers, the very one of the very first thing that the government already implemented was to empower the NSA the NSA started collecting. That's why we have an Edward Snowden, because the NSA started collecting data from people. And data is such a very important currency, and a lot of people don't understand why is that important. Data, our data, when you talk about data, a lot of people need to understand in the concept of data. In the old-fashioned days, in the 80s, when we first computer came out, I remember back in high school we have database management, and when we think of data, we can only think of things that we can punch in on a keyboard, right? To populate a field or a form. That's what we think of data, right? So when we think of computer data, we think of, field number one. What's this field number one? Name. So, okay, punch in your name. Field number two. What's in there? What is your genders? Male, female, age, telephone number, email address, uh, residential address, work address. We think of data as this kind of stuff. Data for the old fashioned, or let's say the simple minded, we think of data as things that you can punch in on a form, using your keyboard on your computer, and filling up a form, populating forms. And so you collect all the names, you collect all the ages, and then you can manipulate those data with what we call data management or data processing. Maybe you'd like to arrange them in an array, arrange them, from ascending to or descending order. Who's the oldest, who's the youngest? But though, okay, folks, data is much more than that. So when the NSA was collecting data, they're not only collecting data with names, phone numbers, address, height, color of your eyes. Yes, those are data too. But do you know that prior to that Y2K, um, all of that Y2K scare that they were talking about, this was before 9/11, when the thing was turning 2000. They said, all the data, all the machines were only designed to read to 2000, and if things go reset on their own, we won't have enough time to try and mitigate all of this resetting. And so they were afraid that things will get into a halt, like traffic lights and cars and trains will just, get into accidents, elevators will stop working. You know why they're saying that? Because when tech people talk about data, they're not just talking about text and numbers, numeric and alphanumeric items that you put in on a form. They're talking about, um, how can I make a good example? So let's say you have a Metro Pass in Toronto. We call it Metro Pass when you take the subway. So you scan that Metro Pass to enter one subway station, and then maybe on your way home you scan that Metro Pass again, uh, to enter the subway station to go home. So you scan it once in the morning from from your origin, and then you scan it the second time from your destination so that you can go back home. Those are data. The mere action that you scan your MetroPass twice from different points, it's data, and those data can be analyzed and processed. So now facial recognition is an available technology everywhere. So if your face showed up on a certain place in the city at 1 in the afternoon, and then your face show up again at 6 o'clock somewhere else, those are data, folks. When we talk about data, this is what they think data is. And with the advent of Internet of all things, let's say you want to buy a pop in a certain vending machine, and you use your credit card over there at that place, and then you use your card again in another place to buy something else. Those are data points where data analysis or data processing are, we think of them are as mundane things, but when they're processing the entire society, they can read, they can analyze, and they can process if there's some sort of like hive mind going on here. For example, one of the things that you can hear from data analysts, they say that a traffic, uh, car traffic, highway traffic, highway traffic that happens in the big cities, in metropolitan cities during rush hour, they say that when you analyze all the little components, every single vehicle on the road, and how they behave, they say that you can almost claim or proclaim that the traffic is like its own, it's a creature that has a behavior and temperament. So they say that traffic is like a hive mind. It operates, you can almost predict it if you understand how the traffic mind works. But, anyways, folks, we were listening to a Google guest at Steve Bannon's show yesterday. And we'll listen to half of it, and this is the other half of yesterday's Bannon War Room. They're talking about performative act behind Facebook crash. Let's listen in.
When you say performative act, you mean from outside hackers trying to show you how vulnerable Facebook is? Somebody internally? What do you mean performative act?
I possibly think that this Facebook whistleblower very conveniently comes and sort of hides all the other Facebook whistleblowers that have come out. Project Veritas has had 4, and you can find them on the internet until this whistleblower came on, and now she's going to basically gobble up all of the internet real estate space when people are trying to search for the crimes that Facebook has done. Now they're going to get this whistleblower and not any of the other whistleblowers that have come before.
Interesting. Zach,
Zach, if I could,
how do people hang on, Joe? Zach, what's your book? How do people get to your new book, and how do people follow you?
Check out my new book. We've got some previews available on Amazon.com. You could also check it out at GoogleLeaksBook.com. And if you want to follow me and see some of my thoughts, check me out at Twitter.com/PerpetualManiac.
Zach, we'd like you to stay. We're gonna Trump maybe come back to you before the end of the show, because this is all breaking news. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower, Project Veritas. Joe, you had something to say?
I actually was going to ask Zach something. I think he can maybe answer, because there are, in the far out sort of conspiratorial realm, notions that maybe Facebook did this intentionally in order to eliminate certain evidence or possible damning data. But
Okay,
who knows?
But hang on.
Who knows?
Let me tether you back to Earth for a second. It's more than just Facebook. This is broader than just Facebook, right?
Well, the question becomes,
it's not all, all the outages are not because
I don't necessarily think that an outage means that Facebook lost all their data, right? So you're talking about internal Facebook servers versus the connectivity of those servers to the broader internet or to their other, obviously they have distributed server centers. And we're hearing, I think New York Times said there's going to be a team out to the California one. Check this out.
But that's their Facebook. Okay, let's take a short break. When we return, by the way, Joe Allen has warned us about the Internet of Things for a long time.
The Internet of Things, it's something that I heard many, many years ago. The Internet of Things, I thought, was when I was younger. When I was told about the Internet of Things, why that is a very cool thing. My very first impression when I was talked to about the Internet of Things was that how to understand Internet of Things is when your fridge would actually, because your fridge is connected to the internet, and it knows, it has sensors in it that it knows when your milk is low, it automatically orders replenishment of certain inventory within your fridge, or even, if you want to hook your pantry to the internet, your fridge, or even your car, you know. So the easy way to understand Internet of Things in today's context: you're driving a car, the computer in that car knows if your tire is a little low and which particular tire needs to be inflated. It tells you your windshield washer level. It tells you if you got enough brake fluid, power steering fluid, the heat inside the cabin, the heat on, what is the heat in the engine block. So that's the Internet of Things. Every aspect of life, and they would like to plug in even biological beings, biological entities into the Internet of Things, so that you can not only measure appliances or components of a car, or components of, your watch syncing with your iPod syncing with your computer syncing with your television. More than that, the Internet of Things, and what they call Internet of all things, includes maybe chipping your cat or your pet dog or your pet gorilla or pet iguana, whatever, and even humans integrating into the Internet of all things. So that is a very interesting concept. And what I heard is that Facebook would like to integrate everything on Facebook, so that everything is seamless. But the downside of that Internet of Things is that you only need to hack um, one of the main components, and you hack the entire thing. But similar to the Apple principle, Apple, you cannot, the concept of jailbreaking, you cannot bring in anything to Apple, to an Apple device that is not compatible, or that is not designed for an Apple device. It needs, you need to jailbreak, and that's because they want to put that kind of lock into the entire systems that they have, so that everything is kind of synchronized according to the hive mind. But that's the downside of Internet of all things, is what we heard and seen yesterday, with one component being hacked and the entire system, to a point that we heard of, like, people working at the Facebook headquarters, not able to go into their rooms and their offices and to the boardrooms, because the entire system was just hacked. Anyways, let's find out more what happened yesterday. This particular segment is called Facebook Seeking Government Action for Information Control. So that is a good point. One of the guests was talking about there on the previous segment, that this might be a self false flag attack, so that Facebook can eliminate some data or some information, some evidence, and also bringing your own whistleblower kind of drowns out the other more valuable, valid whistleblowers that came forward earlier on. And they were talking about Project Veritas as four whistleblowers that would probably be swept under the rug, because Facebook came up with their own whistleblower. So we never know. And I noticed that ever since Facebook came back last night, it seems like our organic traction is way lower than usual. But let's listen in, and we will do some manual hacks after the show goes off live.
Frances Haugen told us she was recruited by Facebook in 2019. She says she agreed to take the job only if she could work against misinformation, because she had lost a friend to online conspiracy theories.
I never wanted anyone to feel the pain that I had felt. And I had seen how high the stakes were in terms of making sure there was high quality information on Facebook.
At headquarters, she was assigned to civic integrity, which worked on risks to elections, including misinformation. But after this past election, there was a turning point.
They told us we're dissolving civic integrity. Like they basically said, oh, good, we made it through the election. There wasn't riots. We can get rid of civic integrity now. Fast forward a couple of months, we got the insurrection. And when they got rid of civic integrity, it was the moment where I was like, I don't trust that they're willing to actually invest what needs to be invested to keep Facebook from being dangerous.
Facebook says the work of civic integrity was distributed to other units.
Led. By the way, new polling shows Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is less popular than former President Donald Trump and his son Don Jr. Director of polling at the Institute of Politics at Harvard University, John Della Volpe, tweeted this chart. It shows Zuckerberg with a favorability of 27% compared to 31% for Don Jr. and 44% for the former president. Della Volpe also noted that younger Americans like Zuckerberg the least. Just 21% of 18 to 24-year-olds had a favorable view of the Facebook founder.
Zuckerberg really has become, David, the big tobacco executives, like in the 80s.
He is the symbol of a platform, of a media company that doesn't seem to care about.
Okay.
Oh,
I got to bring in Jack Posobiec because he's been on this last night.
Can I
By the way,
hold on.
One thing you called. You told me last night. You said you watch Morning Joe. Mika and Joe will be
all over this.
He'll be all over this. Go ahead.
Look, I as a guy who used to be in the intel community, when let me just give like guys, come on. When you're doing a psyop through the media, you can't be this obvious. You just can't be this like you're hitting every note. It's covert, not overt, right? It's called covert operations, not overt operations. You go, there weren't any riots, but then we had the insurrection and Scott Pelley. Of course, it's Scott Pelley because this plays to the midwit. So of course, Scott Pelley's leading the charge. Yes. Tell me more about how misinformation is destroying our country and why we need more big government censorship of that election misinformation. You got to take down the war room. You got to take down Lindell. You got to take down human events. Those are the people that are ruining this country, but only. Let me explain. So the government needs to step in, and there's no discussion of, this is how you get around the Constitution. This is how you get around freedom of speech. You need to, this is what they do. And so typically, look.
Also, they want to get into Telegram and shut down the America First Audits group. All these groups are out there on fire.
You've got people talking about, and all of it. People worried about, put it this way, people are worried about Proton Mail. They're worried about getting into Proton Mail.
So go back, and by the way,
let me explain this.
Go ahead, explain it. Deconstruct it.
A true whistleblower is someone who's coming out that's going against the grain of the institutional philosophy of an organization, right? This is not that. This is the exact opposite. She wants to go pedal to the metal. You are not censoring enough. The conservatives are still allowed on Facebook. We need to shut them down. You need to shut down Lindell. You need to shut down the war room. They're going over to these places like Getter. And this, by the way, you think they're not going to come for Getter with all this? They're going to come. They want, because they see what's going on. They see that people are leaving Facebook. They're going to Getter. They're going to Telegram. They're going to all these other places.
Rumble.
They're sharing Rumble. They're getting away from Facebook. So they're realizing that, and keep in mind, what was her job? The head of civic integrity. And that's, by the way, the reason that I asked Denver to play that clip, specifically that one, is because that's the one where she gives up the game. That's the one you can see.
Tell us about that group. Tell us about that group.
You can see the orchestra, right?
Yeah, but tell us the group she's referring to on Facebook. Who
this
are
is
they?
the Civic Integrity and Misinformation Group. She's the head of it. She was the head censor at Facebook during the election of 2020. And yet she's going to come out and act like all of a sudden she's a whistleblower. What's the phrase, Steve? How about no? Right? We can see what's going on here. They understand that people are leaving Facebook because they know the censorship at Facebook has gotten so insane. So they're moving to other platforms. And she's realizing that the only way to do this is through legislative action. They want the government to step in, and they are going to use brute force. They're going to use emotional appeals. They're going to use these ad hoc attacks on Zuckerberg like this, the personal attacks on him, to say the only way to fix this, of course, has to be government action for the greater good. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Call the shot, take the shot. We know exactly what your guys are doing. Nobody.
We don't have time to continue this. We're going to do it tomorrow. This is related to big tobacco. No, this is somebody.
Right,
in the
that's when
same-
60 Minutes
Yeah.
was 60
Yeah.
Minutes.
This is somebody that's in the act.
I apologize, folks. I was trying to pause it there, but it went to a different spot in the scrub of the video. But here you go, folks. We can see now. 2020 when they say, "Hey, to slow the spread, we need to social distance." And when they want you to social distance, they want you to social distance if they can get away with it. They even said, social distance even in your own homes. do you do you remember that? Can you believe that? They said, they got a double mask and maybe, keep your mask inside your own homes. And here in Canada, even Teresa Tam said, if you're gonna have sex with your partner, that you gotta put that mask on. But I'm using that as an analogy with, yes, indeed, people are trying to leave Facebook and go to other platforms where we are not going to get censored. But they are very jealous of what people do in their own private spaces. So it's like, we used to be here on Facebook and we would like to connect. You see how, opposite, what their virtue signaling or whatever their propaganda is usually opposite of what their intentions are. Facebook says, this is where you come and connect with others, but this is actually a place where you can come and be disconnected from others. And the only way technocrats can actually disconnect people from each other is to first hijack that connection, um, activity. But by bringing you into this platform, and because you think, oh, I'm going to connect with everybody. Now, I'm probably most disconnected to all the people that normally in real life connects to everything that I say and resonates. Whatever I say resonates in their spirit and their soul. But when it comes to Facebook, uh, you know, unless they are like loyal listeners or already part of our notification list, Facebook will not put my voice to those who it resonates with. Maybe Facebook is presenting my voice and those that are my insights and my message usually to people who will not resonate with what I say. But in normal life, in offline life, I know exactly in my mind, I can foresee, or I can picture the kind of people that I know resonates with, every time I have conversations or I share my thoughts to people. I know exactly where they are. And I was hoping, now that we are in the digital age, that this will be a faster process for me to connect with all those people who usually resonates with me. But it's the opposite of what they say. They connect people, come to Facebook so that you will connect with your friends and with your community. No, come to Facebook so that they can hijack your way of connecting with people, and specifically try to disconnect you with others. That's how it works here, folks. Marcia M. Borden, go to Fox News. Facebook whistleblower is testifying now. Oh, it's testifying now. Okay. So I'll check that out, folks, after the break. And just quickly want to say shout out to Lavinia Raginhuna, Carol Wright, Jeannie Kennings, Ruth Hiltunen, Sharon Young, Bill Ambrose, Angela Rosine Cardio. So, folks, we'll take a short break. And when we come back, we'll go to Fox News and we'll continue on listening to some of the issues that were shared yesterday at Steve Bannon Show. So stick around, folks. This is Freedom Fighter Radio. I'm your host, Joey Salvador, on a Tuesday morning, weighing in on what's happened yesterday for 8 hours of outage on Facebook. And when we come back, we are going to tune in to what's happening on Fox News.
Freedom Fighter Radio, what is up? Whoa!
Shout out to Freedom Fighter Radio. And Joe, you're doing great work, brother, and I love it. All right? Always.
Make sure you listen to the Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Show.
I'm on Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Joe Show. That's quite a mouthful. Yes.
Hey guys, this is Chris Sky. Listen to Freedom Fighter Radio. They're here today, back in the blue, and so am I.
Please consider supporting the OJTV production costs and be an insider member for only $3 a month. Go to patreon.com/OJTV Canada. Thank you for your continued support.
Canadians all across the country are sick and tired of the lies, the fear-mongering, and the hate speech they hear from the mainstream media. Download the free radio app, Freedom Fighter Radio. Click the link below, scan our QR code, join our mailing list, and get a free download of our Freedom Fighter Radio app only here on OJTV on The Ordinary Joe Show.
Welcome back, folks. This is Freedom Fighter Radio. Now we are going to tune in on the Senate hearing as this so-called Facebook whistleblower testifies before the U.S. Senate live right now. Let's listen in.
Analyses and discovers things like, up to 10 to 15% of even 10-year-olds in a given cohort may be on Facebook or Instagram.
Okay, so this is why Adam Mosseri, who's the CEO of Instagram, would have replied to Jojo Siwa when she said to him, "Oh, I've been on Instagram since I was 8." He said he didn't want to know that.
Yeah.
So it would be for this reason, correct?
A pattern of behavior that I saw at Facebook was that often problems were so understaffed that there was kind of an implicit discouragement from having better detection systems. So for example, I worked, my last team at Facebook was on the counter espionage team within the threat intelligence org. And at any given time, our team could only handle a third of the cases that we knew about. We knew that if we built even a basic detector, we would likely have many more cases.
Okay, then let me ask you.
Sure.
Let me ask you this. So you look at the way that they have the data, but they're choosing to keep that data and advertise from it, right? You sell it to third parties. So what does Facebook do? You've got these 600,000 accounts that ought not to be on there.
Probably more.
And right. But then you delete those accounts. But what happens to that data? Does Facebook keep that data? Do they keep it until those children go to age 13? Since, as you're saying, they can work backward and figure out the true age of a user. So what do they do with it? Do they delete it? Do they store it? Do they keep it? How do they process that?
My understanding of Facebook's data retention policies, and I want to be really clear, I didn't work directly on that, is that when they delete an account, they delete all the data within, I believe, 90 days in compliance with GDPR. With regard to children underage on the platform, Facebook could do substantially more to detect more of those children, and they should have to publish for Congress those processes because there are lots of subtleties in those things, and they could be much more effective than probably what they're doing today.
Got it. Now, staying with this underage children, since this hearing is all about kids and about online privacy, I want you to tell me how Facebook is able to do market research on these children that are under age 13, because Mrs. Davis was really, she didn't deny this last week. So how are they doing this? Do they bring kids into focus groups with their parents? How do they get that permission? She said they got permission from parents. Is there a permission slip or a form that gets signed? And then how do they know which kids to target?
There's a bunch to unpack there. We'll start with maybe how did they recruit children for focus groups or recruit teenagers? Most tech companies have systems where they can analyze the data that is on their servers. So most of the focus groups I read or that I saw analysis of were around Messenger Kids, which has children on it. And those focus groups appear to be children interacting in person. Often large tech companies use either sourcing agencies that will go and identify people who meet certain demographic criteria, or they will reach out directly based on data on the platform. So for example, on the case of Messenger Kids, maybe you would want to study a child that was an active user and one that was a less active user. You might reach out to some that came from each population.
And so these are children that are under age 13.
Yeah.
And they know it.
For some of these studies. And I assume they get permission, but I don't work on that.
Okay. Well, we're still waiting to get a copy of that parental consent form that would involve children. My time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I'll save my other questions for our second round if we're able to get those. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Senator Blackburn. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much, Ms. Haugen, for shedding a light on how Facebook time and time again has put profit over people. When their own research found that more than 13% of teen girls say that Instagram made their thoughts of suicide worse, what did they do? They proposed Instagram for Kids, which has now been put on pause because of public pressure. When they found out that their algorithms are fostering polarization, misinformation, and hate, that they allowed 99% of their violent content to remain unchecked on their platform, including lead up to the January 6th insurrection. What did they do? They now, as we know, Mark Zuckerberg's going sailing and saying no apologies. I think the time has come for action, and I think you are the catalyst for that action. You have said privacy legislation is not enough. I completely agree with you, but I think you know we have not done anything to update our privacy laws in this country, our federal privacy laws. Nothing, zilch, in any major way. Why? Because there are lobbyists around every single corner of this building that have been hired by the tech industry. We have done nothing when it comes to making the algorithms more transparent, allowing for the university research that you referred to. Why? Because Facebook and the other tech companies are throwing a bunch of money around this town and people are listening to them. We have done nothing significantly past, although we are on a bipartisan basis working in the antitrust subcommittee to get something done on consolidation, which you understand allows the dominant platforms to control all this, like the bullies in the neighborhood, buy out the companies that maybe could have competed with them and added the bells and whistles. So the time for action is now. So I'll start with something that I asked Facebook's head of safety when she testified before us last week. I asked her how they estimate the lifetime value of a user for kids who start using their products before they turn 13. She evaded the question and said, that's not the way we think about it. Is that right? Or is it your experience that Facebook estimates and puts a value on how much money they get from users in general? I'll get to kids in a second. Is that a motivating force for them?
Based on what I saw in terms of allocation of integrity spending, so one of the things disclosed in the Wall Street Journal was that I believe it's like 87% of all the misinformation spending is spent on English, but only about like 9% of the users are English speakers. It seems that Facebook invests more in users who make them more money even though the danger may not be evenly distributed based on profitability.
Does it make sense that having a younger person get hooked on social media at a young age makes them more profitable over the long term as they have a life ahead of them?
Facebook's internal documents talk about the importance of getting younger users, for example, tweens, onto Instagram, like Instagram Kids, because they need to have, they know that children bring their parents online and things like that. And so they understand the value of younger users for the long-term success of Facebook.
Facebook reported advertising revenue to be $51.58 per user last quarter in the US and Canada. When I asked Ms. Davis how much of that came from Instagram users under 18, she wouldn't say. Do you think that teens are profitable for their company?
I would assume so, based on advertising for things like television. You get much substantially higher advertising rates for customers who don't yet have preferences or habits. And so I'm sure they are some of the more profitable users on Facebook, but I did not work directly on that.
Another major issue that's come out of this, eating disorders. Studies have found that eating disorders actually have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness for women. And I led a bill on this with Senators Capito and Baldwin that we passed into law. And I'm concerned that this algorithms that they have pushes outrageous content, promoting anorexia and the like. I know it's personal to you. Do you think that their algorithms push some of this content to young girls?
Facebook knows that the engagement-based ranking, the way that they pick the content in Instagram for young users, for all users, amplifies preferences. And they have done something called a proactive incident response, where they take things that they've heard, for example, like, can you be led by the algorithms to anorexia content? And they have literally recreated that experiment themselves and confirmed, yes, this happens to people. So Facebook knows that they are leading young users to anorexia content.
Do you think they are deliberately designing their product to be addictive beyond even that content?
Facebook has a long history of having a successful and very effective growth division, where they take little tiny tweaks and they constantly are trying to optimize it to grow. Those kinds of stickiness could be construed as things that facilitate addiction.
Right. Last thing I'll ask is, we've seen this same kind of content in the political world. You brought up other countries and what's been happening there. On 60 Minutes, you said that Facebook implemented safeguards to reduce misinformation ahead of the 2020 election, but turned off those safeguards right after the election. And you know that the insurrection occurred January 6th. Do you think that Facebook turned off the safeguards because they were costing the company money, because it was reducing profits?
Facebook has been emphasizing a false choice. They've said the safeguards that were in place before the election implicated free speech. The choices that were happening on the platform were really about how reactive and twitchy was the platform, right? Like, how viral was the platform? And Facebook changed those safety defaults in the run-up to the election because they knew they were dangerous. And because they wanted that growth back, they wanted the acceleration of the platform back after the election, they returned to their original defaults. And the fact that they had to break the glass on January 6th and turn them back on, I think that's deeply problematic.
Agree. Thank you very much for your bravery in coming forward.
Senator Thune.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Blackburn. I've been arguing for some time that it is time for Congress to act. And I think the question is always, what is the correct way to do it, the right way to do it, consistent with our First Amendment right to free speech.
Totally.
This committee doesn't have jurisdiction over the antitrust issue. That's the Judiciary Committee. And I'm not averse to looking at the monopolistic nature of Facebook, honestly. I think that's a real issue that needs to be examined and perhaps addressed as well. But at least under this committee's jurisdiction, there are a couple of things I think we can do. And I have a piece of legislation, and Senators Blackburn and Blumenthal are both co-sponsors, called the Filter Bubble Transparency Act. And essentially what it would do is give users the options to engage with social media platforms without being manipulated by these secret formulas that essentially dictate the content that you see when you open up an app or log on to a website. We also, I think, need to hold big tech accountable by reforming Section 230. And one of the best opportunities, I think, to do that, at least in a bipartisan way, is the Platform Accountability and Consumer Transparency, or the PACT Act. And that's legislation that I've co-sponsored with Senator Schatz, which, in addition to stripping Section 230 protections for content that a court determines to be illegal, the PACT Act would also increase transparency and due process for users around the content moderation process. And importantly, in the context we're talking about today with this hearing, with a major big tech whistleblower, the PACT Act would explore the viability of a federal program for big tech employees to blow the whistle on wrongdoing inside the companies where they work. In my view, we should encourage employees in the tech sector like you to speak up about questionable practices of big tech companies, so we can, among other things, ensure that Americans are fully aware of how social media platforms are using artificial intelligence and opaque algorithms to keep them hooked on the platform. So let me, Ms. Haugen, just ask you, we've learned from the information that you provided that Facebook conducts what's called engagement-based ranking, which you've described as very dangerous. Could you talk more about why engagement-based ranking is dangerous, and do you think Congress should seek to pass legislation like the Filter Bubble Transparency Act that would give users the ability to avoid engagement-based ranking altogether?
Facebook is going to say, you don't want to give up engagement-based ranking. You're not going to like Facebook as much if we're not picking out the content for you. That's just not true. There are a lot of, Facebook likes to present things as false choices. Like you have to choose between having lots of spam. Like let's say, imagine we ordered our feeds by time, like on iMessage or on, there are other forms of social media that are chronologically based. They're going to say, you're going to get spammed, like you're not going to enjoy your feed. The reality is that those experiences have a lot of permutations. There are ways that we can make those experiences where computers don't regulate what we see. We together socially regulate what we see. But they don't want us to have that conversation because Facebook knows that when they pick out the content that we focus on using computers, we spend more time on their platform, they make more money. The dangers of engagement-based ranking are that Facebook knows that content that elicits an extreme reaction from you is more likely to get a click, a comment, or reshare. And it's interesting because those clicks and comments and reshares aren't even necessarily for your benefit. It's because they know that other people will produce more content if they get the likes and comments and reshares. They prioritize content in your feed so that you will give little hits of dopamine to your friends so they will create more content. And they have run experiments on people, producer-side experiments, where they have confirmed this.
So
yeah.
you and your part of the information you provided the Wall Street Journal, it's been found that Facebook altered its algorithm in an attempt to boost these meaningful social interactions, or MSI. But rather than strengthening bonds between family and friends on the platform, the algorithm instead rewarded more outrage and sensationalism. And I think Facebook would say that its algorithms are used to connect individuals with other friends and family that are largely positive. Do you believe that Facebook's algorithms make its platform a better place for most users, and should consumers have the option to use Facebook and Instagram without being manipulated by algorithms designed to keep them engaged on that platform?
I strongly believe, like I've spent most of my career working on systems like engagement-based ranking. Like when I come to you and say these things, I'm basically damning 10 years of my own work, right? Engagement-based ranking, Facebook says we can do it safely because we have AI. You know, the artificial intelligence will find the bad content that we know our engagement-based ranking is promoting. They've written blog posts on how they know engagement-based ranking is dangerous, but the AI will save us. Facebook's own research says they cannot adequately identify dangerous content. And as a result, those dangerous algorithms that they admit are picking up the extreme sentiments, the division. They can't protect us from the harms that they know exist in their own system. And so I don't think it's just a question of saying, should people have the option of choosing to not be manipulated by their algorithms? I think if we had appropriate oversight, or if we reformed 230 to make Facebook responsible for the consequences of their intentional ranking decisions, I think they would get rid of engagement-based ranking, because it is causing teenagers to be exposed to more anorexia content. It is pulling families apart. And in places like Ethiopia, it's literally fanning ethnic violence. I encourage reform of these platforms, not picking and choosing individual ideas, but instead making the platforms themselves safer, less twitchy, less reactive, less viral, because that's how we scalably solve these problems.
Thank you. Ms. Chair, I would simply say let's get to work. So we got some things we can do here. Thanks.
I agree. Thank you. Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Thank you for your courage in coming forward. Was there a particular moment when you came to the conclusion that reform from the inside was impossible and that you decided to be a whistleblower?
There was a long series of moments where I became aware that Facebook, one faced with conflicts of interest between its own profits and the common good, public safety, that Facebook consistently chose to prioritize its profits. I think the moment at which I realized we needed to get help from the outside, that the only way these problems would be solved is by solving them together, not solving them alone, was when civic integrity was dissolved following the 2020 election. It really felt like a betrayal of the promises that Facebook had made to people who had sacrificed a great deal to keep the election safe by basically dissolving our community and integrating it in just other parts of the company.
And when I know their response is that they've sort of distributed the duties.
Yeah.
That's an excuse, right?
I cannot see into the hearts of other men, and I don't know what.
Well, let me say it this way: it won't work, right?
And I can tell you that when I left the company, so the people who I worked with were disproportionately, maybe 75% of my pod of 7 people. Those are product managers, program managers. Most of them had come from civic integrity. All of us left the inauthentic behavior pod, either for other parts of the company or the company entirely over the same 6-week period of time. So 6 months after the reorganization, we had clearly lost faith that those changes were coming.
You said in your opening statement that they know how to make Facebook and Instagram safer. So thought experiment. You are now the chief executive officer and chairman of the company. What changes would you immediately institute?
I would immediately establish a policy of how to share information and research from inside the company with appropriate oversight bodies like Congress. I would give proposed legislation to Congress saying, here's what an effective oversight agency would look like. I would actively engage with academics to make sure that people who are confirming our Facebook's marketing message is true have the information.
I think what she's trying to say here, she's going to invite heavier censorship with the power of the government to come down on people's free speech.
Like requiring someone to click on a link before resharing it, because other companies like Twitter have found that significantly reduces misinformation. No one is censored by being forced to click on a link before resharing it.
Thank you. I want to pivot back to Instagram's targeting of kids. We all know that they announced a pause, but that reminds me of what they announced when they were going to issue a digital currency. And they got beat up by the US Senate Banking Committee, and they said, never mind. And now they're coming back around hoping that nobody notices that they are going to try to issue a currency. Now, let's set aside for the moment the sort of the business model, which appears to be gobble up everything, do everything. That's the growth strategy. Do you believe that they're actually going to discontinue Instagram Kids, or are they just waiting for the dust to settle?
I would be sincerely surprised if they do not continue working on Instagram Kids, and I would be amazed if a year from now we don't have this conversation again.
Why?
Facebook understands that if they want to continue to grow, they have to find new users. They have to make sure that the next generation is just as engaged with Instagram as the current one. And the way they'll do that is by making sure that children establish habits before they have good self-regulation.
By hooking kids.
By hooking kids. I would like to emphasize one of the documents that we sent in on problematic use examined the rates of problematic use by age, and that peaked with 14-year-olds. It's just like cigarettes. Teenagers don't have good self-regulation. They say explicitly, I feel bad when I use Instagram and yet I can't stop. We need to protect the kids.
Just my final question. I have a long list of misstatements, misdirections, and outright lies from the company. I don't have time to read them, but you're as intimate with all of these deceptions as I am. So I will just jump to the end. If you were a member of this panel, would you believe what Facebook is saying?
I would not believe. Facebook has not earned our right to just have blind trust in them. Trust is, last week, one of the most beautiful things that I heard on the committee was trust is earned, and Facebook has not earned our trust.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Schatz. Senator Moran, and then we've been joined by the chair, Senator Cantwell. She'll be next. We're going to break at about 11:30, if that's okay, because we have a vote.
Okay.
And then we'll reconvene.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The conversation so far reminds me that you and I ought to resolve our differences and introduce legislation. So as Senator Thune said, let's go to work.
Our differences are very minor, or they seem very minor in the face of the revelations that we've now seen. So I'm hoping we can move forward, Senator Moran.
I share that view, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. What examples do you know? We've talked about particularly children, teenage girls in specifically, but what other examples do you know about where Facebook or Instagram knew its decisions would be harmful to its users, but still proceeded with the plan and executed those harmful behavior?
Facebook's internal research is aware that there are a variety of problems facing children on Instagram that are, they know that severe harm is happening to children. For example, in the case of bullying, Facebook knows that Instagram dramatically changes the experience of high school. So when we were in high school, or when I was in high school, most kids
You looked at me and changed your wording.
Sorry. When I was in high school, most kids have positive home lives. Like, it doesn't matter how bad it is at school. Kids can go home and reset for 16 hours. Kids who are bullied on Instagram, the bullying follows them home. It follows them into their bedrooms. The last thing they see before they go to bed at night is someone being cruel to them, or the first thing they see in the morning is someone being cruel to them. Kids are learning that their own friends, like people who they care about them, are cruel to them. Like, think about how that's going to impact their domestic relationships when they become 20-somethings or 30-somethings, to believe that people who care about you are mean to you. Facebook knows that parents today, because they didn't experience these things, they never experienced this addictive experience with a piece of technology, they give their children bad advice. They say things like, why don't you just stop using it? And so that Facebook's own research is aware that children express feelings of loneliness and struggling with these things because they can't even get support from their own parents. I don't understand how Facebook can know all these things and not escalate it to someone like Congress for help and support in navigating these problems.
Let me ask the question in a broader way. Besides teenagers or
Sure.
besides girls or besides
Yeah.
youth,
Yeah.
are there other practices at Facebook or Instagram that are known to be harmful but yet are pursued?
Facebook is aware that choices it made in establishing like meaningful social interactions, so engagement-based ranking that didn't care if you bullied someone or committed hate speech in the comments, that was meaningful. They know that that change directly changed publishers' behavior, that companies like BuzzFeed wrote in and said, the content is most successful on our platform is some of the content we're most ashamed of. You have a problem with your ranking, and they did nothing. They know that politicians are being forced to take positions they know their own constituents don't like or approve of because those are the ones that get distributed on Facebook. That's a huge, huge negative impact. Facebook also knows that they have admitted in public that engagement-based ranking is dangerous without integrity and security systems, but then not rolled out those integrity and security systems to most of the languages in the world. And that's what causing things like ethnic violence in Ethiopia.
Thank you for your answer. What is the magnitude of Facebook's revenues or profits that come from the sale of user data?
Oh, I'm sorry. I've never worked on that. I'm not aware.
Thank you. What regulations or legal actions by Congress or by administrative action do you think would have the most consequence or would be feared most by Facebook, Instagram, or allied companies?
I strongly encourage reforming Section 230 to exempt decisions about algorithms, right? So modifying 230 around content, I think has it's very complicated because user-generated content is something that companies have less control over. They have 100% control over their algorithms. And Facebook should not get a free pass on choices it makes to prioritize growth and virality and reactiveness over public safety. They shouldn't get a free pass on that because they're paying for their profits right now with our safety. So I strongly encourage reform of 230 in that way. I also believe there needs to be a dedicated oversight body because right now the only people in the world who are trained to analyze these experiments, to understand what's happening inside of Facebook, are people who, grew up inside of Facebook or Pinterest or another social media company. And there needs to be a regulatory home where someone like me could do a tour of duty after working at a place like this and have a place to work on things like regulation, to bring that information out to the oversight boards that have the right to do oversight.
A regulatory agency within the federal government.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Senator Moran.
Thank you for holding this hearing. And I think my colleagues have brought up a lot of important issues. And so I think I just want to continue on that vein. First of all, the Privacy Act that I introduced along with several of my colleagues actually does have FTC oversight of algorithm transparency. In some instances, I'd hope you take a look at that and tell us what other areas you think we should add to that level of transparency. But clearly that's the issue at hand here, I think, in your coming forward. So thank you again for your willingness to do that. The documentation that you say now exists is the level of transparency about what's going on that people haven't been able to see. And so your information that you say has gone up to the highest levels at Facebook is that they purposely knew that their algorithms were continuing to have misinformation and hate information, and that when presented with information about this terminology, downstream MSI, meaningful social information, knowing that it was this choice, you could continue this wrong-headed information, hate information about the Rohingya, or you could continue to get higher click-through rates. And I know you said you don't know about profits, but I'm pretty sure you know that on a page. Yeah. If you click through that next page, I'm pretty sure there's a lot more ad revenue than if you didn't click through. So you're saying that documents exist that at the highest level at Facebook, you had information discussing these two choices and that people chose, even though they knew that it was misinformation and hurtful and maybe even causing people lives, they continued to choose profit.
We have submitted documents to Congress outlining Mark Zuckerberg was directly presented with a list of, quote, soft interventions. So a hard intervention is like taking a piece of content off Facebook, taking a user off Facebook. Soft interventions are about making slightly different choices to make the platform less viral, less twitchy. Mark was presented with these options and chose to not remove downstream MSI in April of 2020, even though even just isolated in at-risk countries. That's countries at risk of violence. If it had any impact on the overall MSI metric. So he chose,
which in translation means less money.
Yeah, he said,
right? Was there another reason given why they would do it other than they thought it would really affect their numbers?
I don't know for certain. Like Jeff Horowitz, the reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and I struggled with this. We sat there and read these minutes and we're like, how is this possible? And hate speech, misinformation, violence inciting content, graphic violent content. Why wouldn't you get rid of this? And the best theory that we've come up with, and I want to emphasize this is just our interpretation on it, is people's bonuses are tied to MSI, right? Like people stay or leave the company based on what they get paid. And like, if you hurt MSI, a bunch of people weren't going to get their bonuses.
So you're saying that this practice even still continues today? Like we're still in this environment. I'm personally very frustrated by this because we presented information to Facebook from one of my own constituents in 2018 talking about this issue with the Rohingya, pleading with the company. We pleaded with the company, and they continue to not address this issue. Now, you're pointing out that these same algorithms are being used, and they know darn well in Ethiopia that it's causing and inciting violence. And again, they are still today choosing profit over taking this information down. Is that correct?
When rioting began in the United States in the summer of last year, they turned off downstream MSI only for when they detected content was health content, which is probably COVID, and civic content. But Facebook's own algorithms are bad at finding this content. It's still in the raw form for 80, 90% of even that sensitive content. In countries where they don't have integrity systems in the local language, and in the case of Ethiopia, there are 100 million people in Ethiopia in 6 languages. Facebook only supports 2 of those languages for integrity systems. This strategy of focusing on language-specific, content-specific systems, AI to save us, is doomed to fail.
I need to get to one of them. First of all, I'm sending a letter to Facebook today. They better not delete any information as it relates to the Rohingya or investigations about how they proceeded on this, particularly in light of your information or the documents. But aren't we also now talking about advertising fraud? Aren't you selling something to advertisers that's not really what they're getting? We know about this because of the newspaper issues. We're trying to say that journalism that basically has to meet a different standard, a public interest standard that basically is out there basically proving every day, or they can be sued. These guys are a social media platform that doesn't have to live with that. And then the consequences, they're telling their advertisers that this was we see it. We see it. People are coming back to the local journalism because they're like, we want to be with a trusted brand. We don't want to be in, your website. So I think your finding for the SEC is an interesting one, but I think that we also have to look at what are the other issues here. And one of them is, did they defraud advertisers and telling them this was the advertising content that you were going to be advertising in, when in reality it was something different. It was based on a different model.
We have multiple examples of question and answers for the advertising staff, the sales staff, where advertisers say after the riots last summer, were asked, should we come back to Facebook? Or after the insurrection, should we come back to Facebook? And Facebook said in their talking points that they gave to advertisers, we're doing everything in our power to make this safer, or we take down all the hate speech when we find it. But Facebook's own—
And that was not true.
That was not true. They get 3 to 5% of hate speech.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Cantwell. And if you want to make your letter available to other members of the committee, I'd be glad to join you myself.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
thank you for suggesting it.
Thank you.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Haugen, for joining us this week. It's very, very helpful. We're grateful that you're willing to make yourself available. Last week, we had another witness from Facebook, Ms. Davis. She came and she testified before this committee, and she focused on, among other things, the extent to which Facebook targets ads to children, including ads that are either sexually suggestive or geared toward adult-themed products or themes in general. Now, I appreciated her willingness to be here. I didn't get the clearest answers in response to some of those questions. And so I'm hoping that you can help shed some light on some of those issues related to Facebook's advertising processes here today. As we get into this, I want to first read you a quote that I got from Ms. Davis last week. Here's what she said during her questioning. Quote, "When we do ads to young people, there are only 3 things that an advertiser can target around: age, gender, location. We also prohibit certain ads to young people and don't allow them to children." Last week, there are a number of individuals and groups, including a group called the Technology Transparency Project, or TTP, that have indicated that that part of her testimony was inaccurate, that it was false. TTP noted that TTP had conducted an experiment just last month, and their goal was to run a series of ads that would be targeted to children ages 13 to 17, to users in the United States. Now, I want to emphasize that TTP didn't end up running these ads. They stopped them from being distributed to users. But Facebook did, in fact, approve them. And as I understand it, Facebook approved them for an audience of up to 9.1 million users, all of whom were teens. So I brought a few of these to show you today. This is the first one I wanted to showcase. This first one has a colorful graphic encouraging kids to, quote, throw a Skittles party like no other, which, as the graphic indicates, and as the slang jargon also independently suggests, this involves kids getting together randomly to abuse prescription drugs. The second graphic displays an Anna tip. That is a tip specifically designed to encourage and promote anorexia. And it's on there. Now, the language, the Anna tip itself, independently promotes that. The ad also promotes it, insofar as it was suggesting these are images you ought to look at when you need motivation to be more anorexic, I guess you could say. Now, the third one invites children to find their partner online and to make a love connection. You look lonely, find your partner now to make a love connection. Now look, it'd be an entirely different kettle of fish if this were targeted to an adult audience. It is not. It's targeted to 13 to 17-year-olds. Now, obviously, I don't support, and TDP does not support these messages, particularly when targeted to impressionable children. And again, just to be clear, TDP did not end up pushing the ads out after receiving Facebook's approval. But it did, in fact, receive Facebook's approval. So I think this says something. One could argue that it proves that Facebook is allowing and perhaps facilitating the targeting of harmful adult-themed ads to our nation's children. So could you please explain to me, Ms. Haugen, how these ads with a target audience of 13 to 17-year-old children, how would they possibly be approved by Facebook? And is AI involved in that?
I did not work directly on the ad approval system. What was resonant for me about your testimony is Facebook has a deep focus on scale. So scale is, can we do things very cheaply for a huge number of people, which is part of why they rely on AI so much. It is very possible that none of those ads were seen by a human. And the reality is that we've seen from repeated documents within my disclosures is that Facebook's AI systems only catch a very tiny minority of offending content. And best case scenario, in the case of something like hate speech, at most they will ever get 10 to 20%. In the case of children, that means drug paraphernalia ads like that. It's likely if they rely on computers and not humans, they will also likely never get more than 10 to 20% of those ads.
Understood. Mr. Chairman, I've got one minor follow-up question. It should be easy to answer.
Go ahead.
So, well, Facebook may claim that it only targets ads based on age, gender, and location, even though these things seem to counteract that. But let's set that aside for a minute. And that they're not basing ads based on specific interest categories. Does Facebook still collect interest category data on teenagers, even if they aren't at that moment targeting ads at teens based on those interest categories?
I think it's very important to differentiate between what targeting are advertisers allowed to specify and what targeting Facebook may learn for an ad. Let's imagine you had some text on an ad. It would likely extract out features that it thought was relevant for that ad. For example, in the case of something about partying, it would learn partying is a concept. I'm very suspicious that personalized ads are still not being delivered to teenagers on Instagram because the algorithms learn correlations. They learn interactions where your party ad may still go to kids interested in partying because Facebook is almost certainly has a ranking model in the background that it says this person wants more party-related content.
Interesting. Thank you. That's very helpful. And what that suggests to me is that while they're saying they're not targeting teens with those ads, the algorithm might do some of that work for them, which might explain why they collect the data, even while claiming that they're not targeting those ads in that way.
I can't speak to whether or not that's the intention, but the reality is it's very, very, very difficult to understand these algorithms today. And over and over and over again, we saw these biases, the algorithms unintentionally learn. And so, yeah, it's very hard to disentangle out these factors as long as you have engagement-based ranking.
Thank you, Ms. Haugen.
Thank you very much, Senator Lee. Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Thank you, Ms. Haugen. You are a 21st century American hero, warning our country of the danger for young people, for our democracy, and our nation owes you just a huge debt of gratitude for the courage you're showing here today. So thank you. Ms. Haugen, do you agree that Facebook actively seeks to attract children and teens onto its platforms?
And Facebook actively markets to children under the age of 18 to get on Instagram, and definitely targets children as young as 8 to be on in Messenger Kids.
An internal Facebook document from 2020 that you revealed reads, "Why do we care about tweens? They are a valuable but untapped audience." So Facebook only cares about children to the extent that they are of monetary value. Last week, Facebook's global head of safety, Antigone Davis, told me that Facebook does not allow targeting of certain harmful content to teens. Ms. Davis stated, "We don't allow weight loss ads to be shown to people under the age of 18. Yet, a recent study found that Facebook permitted targeting of teens as young as 13 with ads that showed a young woman's thin waist promoting websites that glorify anorexia." Ms. Haugen, based on your time at Facebook, do you think Facebook is telling the truth?
I think Facebook has focused on scale over safety, and it is likely that they are using artificial intelligence to try to identify harmful ads without allowing the public oversight to see what is the actual effectiveness of those safety systems.
You unearthed Facebook's research about its harm to teens. Did you raise this issue with your supervisors?
I did not work directly on anything involving teen mental health. This research is freely available to anyone in the company.
Ms. Davis testified last week, quote, "We don't allow tobacco ads at all. We don't allow them to children either. We don't allow alcohol ads to minors." However, researchers also found that Facebook does allow targeting of teens with ads on vaping. Ms. Haugen, based on your time at Facebook, do you think Facebook is telling the truth?
I do not have context on that issue. I assume that if they are using artificial intelligence to catch those vape ads, unquestionably ads are making its way through.
Okay. So from my perspective, listening to you and your incredibly courageous revelations time and time again, Facebook says one thing and does another. Time and time again, Facebook fails to abide by the commitments that they had made. Time and time again, Facebook lies about what they are doing. Yesterday, Facebook had a platform outage, but for years it has had a principles outage. Its only real principle is profit. Facebook's platforms are not safe for young people. As you said, Facebook is like big tobacco, enticing young kids with that first cigarette, that first social media account designed to hook kids as users for life. Ms. Haugen, your whistleblowing shows that Facebook uses harmful features that quantify popularity, push manipulative influencer marketing, amplify harmful content to teens. And last week in this committee, Facebook wouldn't even commit to not using these features on 10-year-olds. Facebook is built on computer codes of misconduct. Senator Blumenthal and I have introduced the Kids Internet Design and Safety Act, the KIDS Act. You have asked us to act as a committee. And Facebook has scores of lobbyists in the city right now coming in right after this hearing to tell us we can't act. And they've been successful for a decade in blocking this committee from acting. So let me ask you a question. The Kids Internet Design and Safety Act, or the KIDS Act, here's what the legislation does. It includes outright bans on children's app features that, one, quantify popularity with likes and follower counts. Promotes two, promotes influencer marketing, and 3, that amplifies toxic posts, and that it would prohibit Facebook from using its algorithms to promote toxic posts. Should we pass that legislation?
I strongly encourage reforms that push us towards human scale social media and not computer driven social media. Those amplification harms are caused by computers choosing what's important to us, not our friends and family. And I encourage any system that children are exposed to not use amplification systems.
So you agree that Congress has to enact these special protections for children and teens that stop social media companies from manipulating young users and threatening their well-being, to stop using its algorithm to harm kids. You agree with that?
I do believe Congress must act to protect children.
And children and teens also needed privacy online Bill of Rights. I'm the author of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act of 1998. But it's only for kids under 13 because the industry stopped me from making it age 16 in 1998 because it was already their business model. But we need to update that law for the 21st century. Tell me if this should pass. 1, create an online eraser button so that young users can tell websites to delete the data they've collected about them. 2, give young teens under the age of 16 and their parents control of their information. And 3, ban targeted ads to children.
I support all those actions.
Thank you. And finally, I've also introduced the Algorithmic Justice and Online Platform Transparency Act, which would, 1, open the hood on Facebook and big tech's algorithms so we know how Facebook is using our data to decide what content we see, and 2, ban discriminatory algorithms that harm vulnerable populations online, like showing employment and housing ads to white people, but not to Black people in our country. Should Congress pass that bill?
Algorithmic bias issues are a major issue for our democracy. During my time at Pinterest, I became very aware of the challenges of, like I mentioned before, it's difficult for us to understand how these algorithms actually act and perform. Facebook is aware of complaints today by people like African Americans saying that Reels doesn't give African Americans the same distribution as white people. And until we have transparency and our ability to confirm ourselves that Facebook's marketing messages are true, we will not have a system that is compatible with democracy.
So I thank Senator Lee. I agree with you and your line of questions. I wrote Facebook asking them to explain that discrepancy because Facebook, I think, is lying about targeting 13 to 15-year-olds. So here's my message for Mark Zuckerberg. Your time of invading our privacy, promoting toxic content, and preying on children and teens is over. Congress will be taking action. You can work with us or not work with us, but we will not allow your company to harm our children and our families and our democracy any longer. Thank you, Ms. Hogan. We will act.
Thanks, Senator Markey. We're going to turn to Senator Blackburn, and then we will take a break. I know that there's some interest in another round of questions. Maybe, maybe we'll turn to Senator Lujan for his questions before.
Well, we've got Cruz and Scott.
And we have others, so
Yes.
we'll come back after the.
Mr. Chairman, I have to go to sit in the chair starting at noon today.
Why don't we turn to, you had
Yeah,
one question?
I do. I have one question. This relates to what Mr. Markey was asking. Does Facebook ever employ child psychologists or mental health professionals to deal with these children online issues that we're discussing?
Facebook has many researchers with PhDs. I assume some of them are, I know that some have psychology degrees. I'm not sure if they are child specialists. Facebook also works with external agencies that are specialists at children's rights online.
Senator Lujan, and then at the conclusion of Senator Lujan's questions, we'll take a break. We'll come back at noon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the indulgence of the committee. Ms. Haugen, last week, the committee heard directly from Ms. Davis, the global head of safety for Facebook. During the hearing, the company contested their own internal research as if it does not exist. Yes or no, does Facebook have internal research indicating that Instagram harms teens, particularly harming perceptions of body image, which disproportionately affects young women?
Yes, Facebook has extensive research on the impacts of its products on teenagers, including young women.
Thank you for confirming these reports. Last week, I requested Facebook make the basis of this research the data set minus any personally identifiable information available to this committee. Do you believe it is important for transparency and safety that Facebook release the basis of this internal research, the core data set, to allow for independent analysis?
I believe it is vitally important for our democracy that we establish mechanisms where Facebook's internal research must be disclosed to the public on a regular basis, and that we need to have privacy-sensitive data sets that allow independent researchers to confirm whether or not Facebook's marketing messages are actually true.
Beyond this particular research, should Facebook make its internal primary research, not just secondary slide decks of cherry-picked data, but the underlying data public by default? Can this be done in a way that respects user privacy?
I believe in collaboration with academics and other researchers that we can develop privacy-conscious ways of exposing radically more data that is available today. It is important for our ability to understand how algorithms work, how Facebook shapes the information we get to see, that we have these data sets be publicly available for scrutiny.
Is Facebook capable of making the right decision here on its own, or is regulation needed to create real transparency at Facebook?
Until incentives change at Facebook, we should not expect Facebook to change. We need action from Congress.
Last week, I asked Ms. Davis about shadow profiles for children on the site, and she answered that no data is ever collected on children under 13 because they are not allowed to make accounts. This tactfully ignores the issue. Facebook knows children use their platform. However, instead of seeing this as a problem to be solved, Facebook views this as a business opportunity. Yes or no, does Facebook conduct research on children under 13, examining the business opportunities of connecting these young children to Facebook's products?
I want to emphasize how vital it is that Facebook should have to publish the mechanisms by which it tries to detect these children, because they are on the platform in far greater numbers than anyone is aware. I do believe that, or I am aware that Facebook is doing research on children under the age of 13, and those studies are included in my disclosure.
You have shared your concerns about how senior management at Facebook has continuously prioritized revenue over potential user harm and safety. And I have a few questions on Facebook's decision-making. Last week, I asked Ms. Davis, quote, has Facebook ever found a change to its platform would potentially inflict harm on users, but Facebook moved forward because the change would also grow users or increase revenue? Ms. Davis said in response, quote, it's not been my experience at all at Facebook. That's just not how we would approach it. Yes or no, has Facebook ever found a feature on its platform harmed its users, but the feature moved forward because it would also grow users or increase revenue?
Facebook likes to paint that these issues are really complicated. There are lots of simple issues. For example, requiring someone to click through on a link before you reshare it. That's not a large imposition, but it does decrease growth a tiny little amount, because in some countries, reshares make up 35% of all the content that people see. Facebook prioritized that content on the system, the reshares, over the impacts to misinformation, hate speech, or violence incitement.
Did these decisions ever come from Mark Zuckerberg directly or from other senior management at Facebook?
We have a few choice documents that contain notes from briefings with Mark Zuckerberg, where he chose metrics defined by Facebook, like meaningful social interactions over changes that would have significantly decreased misinformation, hate speech, and other inciting content.
And this is the reference you shared earlier to Ms. Cantwell, April of 2020.
Yeah. The soft interventions.
Facebook appeared to be able to count on the silence of its workforce for a long time, even as it knowingly continued practices and policies that continue to cause and amplify harm. Facebook content moderators have called out, quote, a culture of fear and secrecy within the company that prevented them from speaking out. Is there a culture of fear at Facebook around whistleblowing and external accountability?
Facebook has a culture that emphasizes that insularity is the path forward, that if information is shared with the public, it will just be misunderstood. And I believe that relationship has to change. The only way that we will solve these problems is by solving them together. And we will have much better, more democratic solutions if we do it collaboratively than in isolation.
And my final question, is there a senior level executive at Facebook, like an inspector general, who's responsible for ensuring complaints from Facebook employees are taken seriously and that employees' legal, ethical, and moral concerns receive consideration with the real possibility of instigating change to company policies?
I'm not aware of that role, but the company is large and it may exist.
I appreciate that. It's my understanding that there's a gentleman by the name of Roy Austin, who is the vice president of civil rights, who's described himself as an inspector general, but he does not have the authority to make these internal conflicts public. The oversight board was created by Facebook to review moderation policies related to public content specifically. It was not created to allow employees to raise concerns. So again, another area of interest I believe that we have to act on. I thank you for coming forward today.
My pleasure. Happy to serve.
The committee is in recess.